Inside the throne room, two kings sit together, not as enemies but as comrades. These men, whom history now records as Ragnar Lothbrok and Ecbert, appeared as opposites in almost every imaginable way, and yet beneath the surface they were bound by a shared hunger for something elemental, a thirst for knowledge, for conquest, for immortality, not of the body but of the soul. In those ancient yesteryears, Ragnar, as he sailed across distant seas in search of lands unknown, was only beginning to imprint his mark on the pages of history. Meanwhile, in a faraway land, comprised of small bickering kingdoms, Ecbert had a grand vision of unity, one united kingdom. Initially, the separate forces clashed in the same way of many other kings and conquerors, but ambition, as the gods themselves, is a wayward force, and so it was that the very fire that pitted them against each other would also be the one to forge their bond. Thus, with optimism as their compass and hope as their guiding star, they commenced in a joint experiment, fueled by their shared fascination from differing fates. Yet, as history has shown time and time again, the same ambition that drives us towards greatness is often the seed of our undoing as well. What began as a promising dream of unity was soon cast into disarray that will be remembered for the great massacres that followed. They saw in one another not mere rivals, but men chasing the same elusive specters, fate, knowledge, and eternity. But little did they know, for in the end even gods bleed. While I was in a depressed state of mind, weeping like a child in my bed, longing to be able to experience the wonderfully crafted story of the Prestige for the first time again, I stumbled upon a show set in the late 700s and early 800s called Vikings. In the initial seasons of the show, we follow Ragnar's ascension to power. Many thanks to his persistent determination and cunning strategies, he is launched to the forefront of Viking society, a position he navigates with an almost Machiavellian finesse. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. As his fame grew, so did the tension within his own family. There was Rollo's midlife crisis, Legator's own ambitions, and Floki's jealousy of Ragnar's and Athelstan's relationship. Athelstan, a monk captured by Ragnar during his initial raid in England, becomes Ragnar's confidant fairly quickly, serving as a bridge between the Norse and Christian societies, and as he grapples with his faith and loyalty, we see Ragnar engage in increasingly epic battles, introducing new characters along the way, specifically the character of Ecbert, King of Wessex, and later King of Kings in East Anglia. Which brings us to Season 4, Episode 14, where the two kings, after reaching the heights of their powers, must deal with their own demons and face the consequences of their actions. But the road ahead is treacherous, therefore not everyone will make it out alive. In the episode titled In the Uncertain Hour Before the Morning, and All His Angels, we were gifted with the privilege of witnessing the last days of a man torn between his responsibilities and his own desires, his people's fate and his best friends. In a foreign land amongst his enemies, you'll find Ragnar Lothbrok, a man who used his mastery of both the Norse and Christian religions to construct his own death, a death with a singular goal in mind: conquest. Following the unexpected loss of his best friend, whom he loved as much as his wife, or perhaps even more so, and his crushing loss in Paris, he lost the respect of not only his people, but his family as well, and decided to go into self-exile. Years later, he returned to his former kingdom wanting revenge for Ecbert destroying the Norse settlement in Wessex, but his sons were more interested in exploring other parts of the world. Ragnar was old, so he had lost the adventurous spirit he had in his youth, and with Bjorn taking all the warriors with him, Ragnar plunged into a state of desperation, wasting all his resources to assemble a small raiding party comprised of old men, with the hopes of avenging the shattering of his initial aspirations for his people's prosperity. It was obvious that his party stood no chance against Ecbert's army. It is no coincidence that when exactly Ragnar concocted his plan against Ecbert was left a mystery. It might have been after his failed suicide, or when he was forced to bribe old men to help him man his ship, or after he lost half of his party on the way to England. We will never know for sure. They've slowly and carefully built up his character to develop a facade of unpredictability. Throughout the show, Ragnar began teetering on the brink of insanity more and more, gradually closing himself off from his family and friends. Much like how Ecbert hides his true nature from everyone around him, Ragnar's facade conceals a mind sharper than anyone's in the world, even that of the great Ecbert. All we can say for sure is he knew that sacrificing himself in a spectacular way, i.e. going down as a martyr, would be the only way to see his revenge come to fruition. It was part of a larger and bolder strategy that he knew would result in the Vikings' conquest of England. He arrives at Ecbert's castle, and as he plays the role of a northern harmless traveler coming to visit his old friend, his son Ivar pays great attention to this act of his. This is the first instance of many that will inspire him to adopt a similar facade to Ragnar. Taken after his father, someone he idolizes, he will learn to hide the true danger he poses with his disability. He will let people underestimate him, which he will later take advantage of. But for the time being, the writer has only just begun to set up the devious man he will become, not long after his trip to England is over. This is a panel you'll soon notice to be present in these two episodes, As they end old series-long plotlines, they simultaneously begin new ones that will be at the center of the rest of the series. Aethelwulf is so pleased with himself for capturing Ragnar, king of the Vikings, but in reality all he did was recognize him, as Ragnar willingly turned himself in. Aethelwulf is proud of himself for beating down an old man and locking him and his crippled son up. Makes sense since that's the type of man he is. Unlike Ecbert, Aethelwulf is straightforward and not as politically savvy. He is depicted as a loyal son who faithfully carries out his father's orders and is constantly overshadowed by his brilliance. Someone that, for all his life, has never managed to achieve anything on his own. All his accomplishments, all his successes were gained due to his father's guidance. This is why he is overjoyed when he sees Ragnar unarmed and alone, willfully walking to his lion's den. He sees this as the perfect opportunity to showcase his skills to his father. He believes his God has blessed him with this opportunity, so he can finally live up to his father's expectations. But only if that were so. His ineptitude as a leader and a politician is the reason why he doesn't even consider the possibility that Ragnar is planning something big. Even so, his weaknesses won't stop him from attempting to gain Ecbert's approval and trust. Still feeling the high of capturing a living legend, he tries to interrogate him, and despite his weak efforts, Ragnar simply brushes him off with a basic question.
Where is your father?
The blow Ragnar dealt was not physical, but it cut straight to the core of Aethelwulf. Ragnar's keen perception reveals the truth. He's nothing but a pawn, and has no actual power. He's just a child playing grown-up, hoping his daddy will acknowledge him. And no better way to communicate than with how Ecbert speaks to him. Once Ecbert arrives home, he excitedly shows his daddy what he's done, what he has achieved on his own.
Where is he? What have you done with him? Leave.
With these three simple lines, it's perfectly conveyed to us what Ecbert's and Aethelwulf's father-son relationship is like, and what it must have been like to be raised by Ecbert. Ecbert views him as nothing more than just a pawn. Ecbert sees no distinction between him and a random soldier in his army. The sole reason why he gave him any modicum of power is due to his usefulness in furthering his own ambitions, and the failure to acknowledge Aethelwulf as his son will completely ruin his public image.
What took you so long?
From a certain point of view, the previous two seasons have been leading up to these two's reunion. Ecbert cuts straight to the chase and only asks what took his dear old friend so long to return. This one question effectively conveys the blunt tone the conversations are gonna take. He and Ragnar are old men now, time has passed, that much is evident in their grizzled appearances alone. They have more days behind them than ahead, so they no longer have time for small talks. Ragnar asks to see his son, Ecbert obliges, and so he has Ivar brought in to prove to Ragnar he is unharmed. He treats him kindly, assuming just like everyone else that meets Ivar that he is completely harmless. I mean, how could a disabled kid be of any danger to anyone? This is one of the many lessons Ragnar teaches Ivar in the small amount of time they spend with each other. From this point on, Ivar can be seen using his disability as a weapon against his foes. It works so well, everyone, even Ecbert, willfully ignores the fact that Ivar is dressed as a warrior. While watching films, you cannot help but notice the best and most memorable moments often come from the same setting, the protagonist and antagonist simply having a conversation. There's something incredibly captivating about scenes where two well-crafted characters converse, mostly for the reason that this is where you get the deepest level of insight into their characters, and so you leave the scene with a much greater understanding of who they are as people and what their ideas are. Case in point, in The Avengers, while the power dynamic is seemingly in favor of Natasha, it is in fact Loki, the god of chaos, who is leading the scene. Common misconception: Loki is not, never was, and never will be the god of mischief. He is a character in Norse mythology who is the god responsible and in charge of chaos in the world. He is known for his mischievous nature, often pulling pranks on other gods and mortals, but his job is to govern chaos. Much akin to Ares from Greek mythology, who is the god of war and not conflict. Even as Natasha proudly exposes that she has cunningly manipulated Loki into revealing his scheme, the reveal is on purpose smooth, for his plan is already well underway. Scenes such as this resonate with audiences because the villain exploits the hero's false sense of confidence, gained from their flawed interpretation of the power dynamic within the scene. The villain carefully toys with the cracks in the hero's armor, preying on their character flaws and weaknesses like a proficient predator, and we get a whole lot of that in The Uncertain Hour Before the Morning and All His Angels, two episodes that are saturated with exactly that type of setting. Ecbert seems to be the one in charge. Ragnar is in his kingdom after all, and he's not only unarmed but also unmanned. Yet, in the scenes they share with each other, we are reminded of Ecbert's greatest character flaw. He has made himself so great at the Game of Thrones that he has no true rival anymore. Until he met Ragnar, that is.
It was wrong of my son to slaughter all your farmers and their families. But as you probably guessed, it was done under my orders. Mea culpa. Mea maxima culpa. It was part of a larger and bolder strategy.
Ecbert, fully aware his lies wouldn't withstand Ragnar's scrutiny, ups against creating any pretense about the Norse colony status. He comes clean and admits that his son destroyed it under his orders. Ecbert and Ragnar are kindred spirits in aspiration. They share a mutual dream. Two separate cultures' coexistence on mutual land, soul belonging to one, craft to another. But as I stated before, Ecbert also had a vision of a united kingdom, thus he never intended on letting them settle. Ecbert is a dreamer, but also a pragmatist, the type of man who says,
"It was the right idea at the wrong time."
And the presence of the Norse settlement served as a potential gathering point for enemies and apostates. He was also aware that coexistence with the Norse was a risky premise, given that they're known for raiding and pillaging, as the people of the kingdom he was trying to take over would not allow the settlement to exist much longer. People like Viksten and Eliot may not have been willing to work with him if the settlement was still present on his land, being that Egbert took the land from his own people and that pagans that worship false gods performed sacrifices on it. Not only that, he saw the perfect chance to wipe out all his competition, so he took it. He seized this opportunity by having his nobles violate his peace treaty with Ragnar, which allowed him to remove them from their powers and merge it with his own. So by destroying the settlement, he not only eliminated a potential threat to his people, but also to him and his vision of England.
On your previous visit, you left behind another son. This is your son, Magnus.
Ecbert introduces Ragnar to the son he left behind, Magnus, a child of Ragnar and English Queen Quentred. Egbert leans closer, listening to their conversation intently. He always had his doubts about Magnus, and his suspicion is about to get verified, because despite Magnus resembling Ragnar, with his blonde hair and blue eyes, the harsh truth is finally told to him.
Because I never had sex with your mother.
Egbert smiles, he's proven right yet again. The child is then immediately cast out and sent to his death by Ethelwolf. But the gods had a different destiny in mind for him, a very different fate Egbert and his son ever imagined for him. The same fate Ragnar imagined for himself when coming to meet his old friend. Death, as always.
Why have you taken so long to return?
It's part of a larger and bolder strategy.
Despite the fact that Egbert hides his true aspirations from everyone, King Ragnar and Egbert are both ambitious men. Therefore Egbert has a natural attraction towards Ragnar. He represents the person Egbert wishes he could be. He has grown tired of playing politics with people, and now that he has everything he wanted, he simply wants to be himself, his true self. But it seems that this attraction is only one-sided, as Ragnar realized Egbert's true nature the very first time they met. Also, who wouldn't be interested in a lowly farmer who managed to climb the social ranks and become the king of an entire nation, and a legend?
I don't like to see you in a cage. What would you do if I let you out?
What's interesting is Ragnar's deep understanding of Egbert's psyche. While Ragnar had to learn the brutal reality of the isolating nature of leadership, Egbert hid himself and refused to face the harsh truth entirely, going so far as to turn people into mementos of the man he, like Ragnar, viewed as his dearest and only friend, claiming his lover and son as his own in the process. This is exactly the reason why Ragnar is the only person capable of taking advantage of Egbert's innate weakness, his desire to keep his position and the accompanying power without being completely isolated from everyone.
Ja, Koninger, Erik. Koninger. Hettefe.
Are you happy about doing this, brother?
Since when does any of this have anything to do with my happiness?
This show is a riveting exploration of what it means to be king and the complexities of leadership, a leader's inability to be truly honest with anyone.
I have a son. About your age.
Where is he? I would like to meet him.
Do not know where he is. That is by his choice. I should never have mentioned him. And drink.
The sacrifices they're forced to make for the betterment of their people, how isolating it can be, and accepting the truth that religion is essential for maintaining order. It's nothing but a societal construct, meant to make our everyday lives more sufferable. And this simple truth is what allows Ragnar to execute his bold plan. Unlike Ragnar, Ecbert strongly believes in his people's faith, and Ragnar recognizes this. Thus he, using his extensive knowledge of both religions, sets his plan in motion.
I would kill you.
He is genuinely hurt and surprised by Ragnar's response, and also drunk. Ragnar ingeniously manipulates Egbert into getting drunk, giving him the opportunity to get some information out of him. A great callback to the time when Athelstan, also drunk, gave Ragnar significant information about the Saxons and their culture.
Or not. It is your decision, not mine. You have the power, not me. You like power, don't you?
He knows how to stroke Egbert's colossal ego, leading him into a false sense of security. It's a small jab at Egbert's character. Ragnar carefully toys with Egbert's weakness, his insatiable hunger for power, reaffirming Ragnar's deep understanding of Egbert's character. He essentially holds up a mirror up to Egbert and forces him to confront his unapologetic pursuit of supremacy with this line. This makes him feel the need to justify himself to Ragnar.
Well, I only like it because it allows me to do good things.
Really?
He taunts Ragnar with the key to his cage, still uncertain about his old friend's true purpose for his visit. There's a great allegory present in this moment. The key embodies power and control in this scene. When he places it in front of Ragnar, he is almost literally dangling freedom in his face, showing Ragnar that he is the one in control. It's an act of dominance, a calculated move by Egbert to assert his power over Ragnar. But don't forget that Ragnar and he are equals, so Ragnar obviously sees through Egbert's facade. He understands the game being played, and instead of calling him out, he plays along. His goal is making Egbert believe he's the one in control.
I think I've used my power rather well.
You can hardly dispute this claim. When it comes to ruling, he differs from Ragnar, who crushed his enemies and wasted his power as the king of the Northmen. Egbert used his power to build something, a stronger, united England, and his methods used to achieve that goal were sometimes necessarily callous. He genuinely believes that his actions, like using his son as a pawn, will benefit his people in the long run. Whether it's arranging marriages or outmaneuvering his rivals, Egbert is always thinking about his people's welfare while filling his own ambitions. He understands that change is inevitable if England is to prosper in a time filled with uncertainty and conflict. He likes power and he likes what it allows him to do. Love him or hate him, there's no denying that Egbert has brought stability and welfare into the once bickering kingdoms of England. And he knows that, which is why he was so quick to respond. He sought knowledge, knowledge on being a good leader, knowledge about the world, about differing cultures with differing faiths, and this unquenchable thirst for knowledge led to battles with other equally ambitious and powerful men, such as Ragnar Lothbrok, a man that had a different relationship to power compared to Egbert. His rise in ranks was merely a side effect of his desire to explore the world. When we are introduced to him, it's made clear to us that Ragnar likes to challenge societal norms. His decision to go against Haraldsson's order and sail west established this fundamental character trait, his refusal to be held back by his culture's traditions. So as he continued to raid and explore new lands, his fame and power naturally grew, and his unrelenting pursuit of his passion was often the cause of conflict between him and other people in the show. Unlike Egbert, he was never really happy with his position as leader. His relationship with Athelstan was constantly being tested, his sanity and authority questioned, his ambitions rivaled. Being king brought him nothing but misery. At his lowest point in life, he was a drug addict running from his responsibilities with a princess from the other side of the planet. But at his core, he was always a simple man, wanting only to be with his family and grow old on a happy little farm. And in his old age, he was a lunatic outcast, running around embarrassing himself and having to bribe old men to join him on a suicide mission.
I've used it to unite all the small, squabbling kingdoms of England into a single entity, now capable of defending itself against any who might come to threaten or destroy it.
Like me.
I thought you came in search of good farming lands, and that you wanted to find some way that our peoples could live together and mutually benefit.
Oh, so you thought by killing all of my people, that was mutually beneficial?
No, of course not. I've already expressed my deep regret. Fact is, it was the right idea at the wrong time. But I firmly and I absolutely believe that such accommodations will come to pass. Perhaps even in my grandson's time.
Ecbert didn't lie even if he wanted to his friend, his equal. Now that Ecbert has all this land his successors will inherit, with accompanying unlimited power, it soon will be the right time. But Ragnar does not fully understand what he means by this line, but he will soon realize that his dream can still come to pass. It might be that Ragnar's history leans in this direction too. When it comes to change, being too early can be just as bad as being too late, and Ragnar may belong on the form end of the spectrum.
If we defeat Ecbert in battle, he may be prepared to offer us more, in terms not only of gold, but of land.
This was a gift in good faith.
What is good faith? Why should there be good faith between us and Christians?
Perhaps they were both men ahead of their time, resulting in the shared dream being controversial in their own era, only to be understood by future generations who might have a better chance of realizing it.
I hope that someday our gods can become friends.
Ecbert, the genius he is, knows that timing is everything in the game of politics and warfare. He understood that massacring the Norse settlement prematurely could backfire, and lead to the Norse launching a full-scale assault on England, one that Wessex wasn't ready to face yet. So he bid his time and waited until Ragnar's forces left. But being old allows for a great deal of retrospect, and realized that he, much like his old rival, Ragnar, was also too early, which explains why he is so reluctant in releasing him. Even though he views him as a friend, he's still afraid of what Ragnar might do if he sets him free. Basically, he fears that Ragnar has returned for vengeance.
What do you want me to say?
Ecbert, ever the master manipulator, attempts to control the conversation and steer it in his favor. Classy move from the master of Game of Thrones, but Ragnar sees through Ecbert's deception.
The truth.
Ragnar's directness was never a match for Ecbert's smooth talk. Ragnar always had a disdain for such things. He is a person that always had an unwavering commitment to honesty, as long as it didn't involve himself directly. As I said before, this is what fundamentally differentiates the two. Ragnar is not afraid of the truth. Ecbert, on the other hand, will rather hide from it, and that's what makes this line so powerful. Ragnar's insistence on honesty forces Ecbert to confront the uncomfortable truth he always wants to avoid. The truth that he could have found another way to unite England, and that didn't involve destroying the settlement. The fact that his presence might have been no cause for concern, that Ecbert's people might have been fine with the Vikings.
For the people outside of this villa, you are the most dangerous man on this earth. You have quite the reputation. They're all mortally terrified of you.
Ecbert isn't just talking about Ragnar's physical prowess or his ability to lead armies. He's talking about the very core of Ragnar's character, the aura of power and intimidation that surrounds him. And he isn't just referring to his enemies, he's talking about everyone. The sheer force of Ragnar's personality brings fear into the heart of anyone whom he meets, including his own people and even his family. By highlighting the fear he inspires in others, Ecbert is probing for Ragnar's true intentions. Is he fulfilled with his current level of power, or does he want more? Does he also love the power his reputation awards him with, or does he hate it how it alienates him from everyone else? Ecbert pays close attention to Ragnar's response, seeing if he responds aggressively, defensively, or with subtlety, trying to pick up clues about his plans.
What about you?
A subtle jab at Ecbert's own vulnerabilities, Ragnar doesn't address his assertion. Instead, he, always keeping his cards close to his chest, cleverly turns the table on Ecbert, making his jailer his prisoner. He has successfully turned the power dynamic in the scene to his favor.
Are you sure?
Not entirely, no.
Ecbert frees Ragnar from his cage. As he emerges, he stands tall, much like the giant his legend portrays him as, before falling to the ground, representing his fall from grace over the last few years. The seer's cryptic words echoing in Ragnar's mind ever since. He told Ragnar about a prophecy foretelling he's fated to die on the same day a blind man sees him. In this moment, he interprets the blind man to be Ecbert, who's blinded by manipulation and unaware of his own unwilling involvement in Ragnar's fate.
You have to kill me. The seer told me that I am fated to die the day the blind man sees me. But you have to kill me.
Must we talk of death?
Death has been uppermost on my mind for a long time.
Death, always death, but not just his own. Athelstan's death was his fault, and he's the one that has to live with it. His failure to protect him caused him to betray Ragnar's people's fate. His honest admission speaks to the inner turmoil he's been dealing with, showing us that even legends have moments of doubt and fear. In his youth he was a man ahead of his time, and in his old age he is a man haunted by his own past. He feels compelled to redeem himself for his past failures, and says his culture looks forward to that and welcomes it. The only way he knows how to is by sacrificing himself. Believable characters are what makes stories believable. That is why all good stories have believable characters. His characterization, not just in this scene, but throughout the entire show, is incredibly human and believable. Him being vulnerable and struggling with the aftermath of his past actions, and the way he dealt with them, turns him from a fictional character into a person that could exist in the real world.
You Vikings are incorrigible. You emerge from the womb with only one thing on your mind. How to die.
Ecbert almost laughs. His sarcastic response to Ragnar's request of his own execution is not just because of the absurdity of it, but also because the pain he will feel from losing his equal will be unbearable. Ragnar has always been a thorn in Ecbert's side. Their relationship is built on a mutual expertise in manipulation of others, with both of them trying to outwit the other. And for a long time it seemed Ecbert came out victorious over his frenemy. But in the soon-to-be end, Ragnar will prove himself to be the superior manipulator of the two. It's hard to say if Ragnar believes his fate has been sealed, as he's not truly a man of faith, but in this moment Ragnar confronts Ecbert with the truth. He knows that his time is up and that he's been betrayed. He's practically begging Ecbert to kill him. It's a moment of raw honesty from Ragnar. But to Ecbert, Ragnar represents an exciting challenge, a worthy opponent in the Game of Thrones. So the thought of killing his only rival is ridiculous to him and refuses to even entertain the idea. There's a hint of admiration in Ecbert's words. In his introduction he tells the story of his teacher's past experience with the Vikings. He paints a vivid picture of what it's like to come face to face with these fierce warriors from distant lands, driven by a hunger for conquest. As he tells his story, the way he characterizes them and his facial expression hint at his fear and respect for the pagans. He recognizes the threat they pose to his god, but is also intrigued by their potential resourcefulness, and at the same time he understands that dealing with the Vikings will be a never-ending game of cat and mouse. He and the rest of the Christians view them only as a force of nature, impossible to tame, incapable of change, and in a way Egbert admires them for their relentless pursuit of power and glory, for he sees a part of himself in them.
We have a lot to talk about, you and I.
Indeed we do. Ragnar has a lot on his mind. It's not easy for a king navigating your thoughts and feelings when you're isolated by your position. Ragnar and Egbert both know they might be the only ones each other can talk to. They have much in common after all. They are powerful and curious men. They speak each other's languages. They have loved the same woman. They have loved the same man. They are reflections of each other, two sides of the same coin. They may clash on the battlefield, but deep down, they understand each other in ways that few others can, which is what makes the dynamic so compelling to watch.
What if your god does not exist?
My dear friend, what are you talking about?
Your god? My gods. What if they don't exist?
Well, if God or the gods don't exist, then nothing has meaning.
Well, everything has meaning.
What on earth does that mean?
What do you need? Your god.
Well, if there were no gods, then anyone could do anything and nothing would matter. You could do as you liked and nothing would be real and nothing would have meaning or value. So even if the gods don't exist, it's still necessary to have them.
If they don't exist, then they don't exist. We have to live with it.
At some point in evolution we became aware of existence itself, and with this evolutionary step came the dire need for purpose. Thus we created religion. Religion is something that combines narration and contemplation, while at the same time stimulating both. It has ritual aspects and sometimes even theoretical. There are elements of dance, play, poetry, morality, and the use of power. But if you're looking for something common amongst all religions, it would have to be the escape they provide from everyday life, an endless cycle of purpose-driven problem-solving in which our wants can never be satiated. Everyday life is quite literally intolerable if there's nothing else or any other way to live. Fortunately, nobody has to live by repeating the same routine every day, because despite the impression that daily life is only a never-ending cycle of insanity, it's actually shaped by cultural influences. What we perceive as our daily routines are filtered through layers of interpretation, heavily influenced by our culture. The earliest religions are indistinguishable from tribe cultures. The activities that everyone in the tribe does together and the stories they tell to each other become their religion, and most of them refer to thoughts that would never actually occur to people naturally, but rather thoughts that they might entertain if they wanted to make sense of what they do and say. Thanks to prayers, myths, and moral teachings, religion offers a framework for understanding the world and our place in it. This is why there isn't a singular true religion that exists and resonates with every single person in the world. Each one has a specific type of world they provide escape from and meaning to. For instance, in the world of the Vikings, warfare reigns supreme, which is why the teachings of Christ is utterly absurd in their eyes. And as their existence is infused with battle, the idea of afterlife in Valhalla is a comforting one, especially with the constant presence of death in their society. Ecbert says that religion is needed, even if gods don't exist. Ragnar says it doesn't matter, even if gods exist. Their back and forth serves as a vehicle to explore the different sides of belief. Ever since he met Athelstan, Ragnar's mind has been pondering the most important question we can ask as humans. What is the meaning of life? More specifically, in a time of all-encompassing religious beliefs, Ragnar dares to ask, is it possible for life to have meaning if gods don't exist? When Ragnar challenges the foundation of Ecbert's worldview, Ecbert utilizes the same form of argumentation a lot of philosophers use, known as the argument for meaning. He asserts that the existence of gods is necessary for life to have inherent meaning and value. This reflects his deeply ingrained religious belief, but Ragnar, known for his unconventional thinking, unconventional for his time that is, has an opposing view to Ecbert's. He proposes that people can create their own meaning and purpose in life. His belief is that instead of meaning coming from a divine source, we are in charge of creating meaningful lives for ourselves. Ecbert rebuttals by asserting that if there is no prebuilt meaning to existence, then everyone can just simply make up one for themselves, that without the belief in a higher power, a peaceful society would not be possible. His peaceful society would not be possible. Then Ecbert goes on to argue that we cannot live as if life is meaningless. If no religion existed, there would be nothing stopping anyone from making as many eloquent assertions about the meaning of life and creating senses of morality that allow for heinous acts. We need a certain framework that gives us those, and of course Ecbert already has a specific framework in mind. He passionately believes that Christianity can give answers to questions of purpose, value, and morality. And finally, Ragnar accepts the uncertainty surrounding the existence of gods, yet he still retains his original position. He comments that whether or not the gods exist, humanity still has to grapple with the realities of life. Such a vast amount of information is conveyed to us about their respective views in the world, and what's been on their minds for a long time now, and what is such a brief exchange between them. Moreover, they delve a little deeper into their contrasting views of religion, by mentioning what each other's afterlives promise.
Ah, yes, but you don't. You don't live with it. You only think of death. You only think of Valhalla.
And all you think about is heaven, which seems like a ridiculous place where everybody is always happy.
Valhalla is ridiculous. All the dead warriors get to fight again in the courtyard each morning and kill each other again. And then they all have supper together.
And they are both ridiculous.
Ecbert interpreted Ragnar saying all he thinks about is death as thinking of Valhalla. This reflects his flawed perception of Ragnar as a warrior who is driven by the promise of glory in battle. They understand each other as kings, but only Ragnar understands Ecbert on a deeper level. Nevertheless, Ecbert suggests that Vikings' focus on Valhalla limits their perspective on life and ignores the joys of everyday existence. When Ecbert highlights the repetitive and violent nature of Ragnar's afterlife, he's pointing out how absurd and even undesirable an endless cycle of killing and dying is. From his religious framework, that is, seeing as how enamored he is by Christianity. On the opposing side is Ragnar, implying that living in a place where everyone is always happy is absurd, and maybe even undesirable in the long run, not just from his religious framework, but from all points of view. Ragnar's dismissal of both Valhalla and heaven as equally ridiculous speaks to his rejection of fate and his interest in finding meaning from within, rather than any lands beyond death. In the end, they come together and agree that both of their religions are ridiculous, not just their afterlives. And all this talk about religion and afterlife prompts Ecbert to finally mention their dear friend Athelstan.
Athelstan,
was a man of God. And now he is dead.
Ecbert remembers Athelstan and how much it hurt when Ragnar took him away. His heart is still aching from his loss. Perhaps that's why he was so overzealous when he saw Ragnar again. Ragnar being here means there is a chance that Athelstan is with him. Long ago Ragnar believed he would be together with Athelstan in Valhalla, then he thought he would see him in heaven, but now he only knows that Athelstan is dead. But Ecbert was never certain of Athelstan's death, not until Ragnar told him. Athelstan's unique position as a bridge between the Norse and Christian society was the cause of Ragnar and Ecbert's transformation into better people. For Ecbert, Athelstan, with his connection to the Northmen, gave him a glimpse of the potential for enlightenment beyond his own Christian worldview. His fascination with Athelstan, and Caesar to an extent, represents his yearning for knowledge beyond his own religion. Ecbert, unsure if he even wants to know, hesitates before asking Ragnar how their friend died.
Tell him what happened.
Floki killed him.
Ecbert doesn't believe it. Didn't Ragnar love him too? How could he let it happen? Given Ragnar's abandonment of his religion, he has no problem in acknowledging Floki's responsibility for Athelstan's death. But Ecbert, in disbelief, pun intended, turned to religion in a means to ease his pain, saying that some higher power must have been responsible.
So your gods killed him?
No, Floki killed him out of jealousy, because I loved Athelstan more than him.
But Ragnar is quick to correct him, saying Floki did it out of spite, and assigning responsibility directly to human actions, devoid of any divine influence. And that much is true. For Ragnar, Athelstan was the embodiment of the unknown. Through him he encountered the mysteries of fate. He challenged Ragnar's worldview and his prejudiced view on religions other than his own. Athelstan's teachings forced him to expand his simplistic view on the world, turning him into a greater and more empathetic leader. Prior to Ragnar meeting Athelstan, Floki was his closest friend. Floki is characterized as a person that is fiercely loyal to his friends and a devout follower of the Norse gods. While Ragnar initially shared his devotion to the gods, all of that changed when he met Athelstan. Quickly, they developed an unbreakable bond that was built on a mutual curiosity about other cultures. Over the following years, Ragnar began to rely on Athelstan and even confide in him more and more. And from the outside, Floki viewed this as Athelstan slowly poisoning Ragnar's mind, and began feeling he was stealing Ragnar away from him. Unlike Ecbert, Floki did not share Ragnar's futuristic mindset. His devotion to the old ways constantly clashed with Ragnar's willingness to embrace new ideas. And when one of their mutual friends died due to Ragnar's dream, Floki's sadness further fuels his growing resentment of Athelstan, the person of the body changed within the Norse community. Ragnar rightfully points out that Thorstein chose to fight for his dream. He didn't force him to. But Floki's mind was already made up. His jealousy of Athelstan already convinced him his death was the Christians' fault. Nothing Ragnar could have said would have changed Floki's view of Athelstan. His genuine friendship with Ragnar made him the perfect target for Floki's resentment of all Christians. And this growing resentment is what ultimately led to his tragic betrayal of Ragnar.
I was jealous too, when he chose to go back with you. I felt his loss grievously.
He left because he loved me more.
Well then, you should have protected him.
He didn't need protecting.
Ecbert smiles and confesses his jealousy of Ragnar's relationship with Athelstan. Ragnar's plan worked. For the first time in his life, Ecbert shows his vulnerable side. The shared love for Athelstan underlies their mutual hope for peaceful coexistence between their people and gods. Despite their conflicting interests, both Ragnar and Ecbert find common ground in their mutual love for Athelstan. Ragnar says Athelstan loved him more, but who is he to say who he loved more? No one can know that except for Athelstan himself. Ragnar claiming he loved him more reflects how immensely attached he was to him. He loved him more than he loved his family. He needed him. We all saw what happened to Ragnar after he died. He abandoned his people, his friends, everyone. And he abandoned his dream of seeing the world, his dream of a united nations, his responsibilities as a king. That is why he let Floki lead the initial attack on Paris, not just out of anger at him, but also because he was done being a king. He abandoned all of his ambitions. And Ecbert finally acknowledges Floki was responsible for his death, finding common ground and realizing what Athelstan helped Ragnar see, seeing that while it is true that we are all fated to die someday, we are still in charge of how and when we die.
We're born alone, we die alone, and we make what we can of life.
Realizing that we are tasked with creating meaningful lives for ourselves, hinting at his true feelings towards religion. Maybe his belief was too just an act he put on in order to achieve his ambition. I mean, how can a man that truly believes in Christianity commit suicide, knowing he'll be forever damned and will never see Athelstan in heaven.
What we learn from others must chime with something inside oneself.
How can a Christian say he'd
Sup with the devil if he would show me how to achieve my earthly goals? Your kingdom, Lord, as you have said, is not of this world, but my kingdom is.
Ragnar's respect for Athelstan's autonomy and his ability to navigate his own path was a constant, until the moment Floki intervened, that is, and tore them apart, showing Ragnar how much he truly loved him. But Ecbert, on the other hand...
What does that mean?
We needed him. He never needed us.
If he'd stayed here with me, he'd still be alive.
He had enemies here also.
He belonged here with me. I would have protected
Who are
him.
you to say where he belonged?
Ecbert never knew Athelstan the way Ragnar did. To Ecbert, Athelstan was merely the most holy man in all of England. This is where they differed in their friendship shared with him. Ragnar recognized the instrumental role Athelstan played in his life. Athelstan struggled with his own beliefs, which sparked introspection in Ragnar. He served as a sort of guide on Ragnar's spiritual journey. Ecbert viewed him through a lens of possession, reflecting his desire to control everything and everyone in his life. He took advantage of his knowledge of Latin and Old English, having him deciphering ancient Roman texts in his wine cellar. Ecbert had a yearning for intellectual enlightenment, a void that Athelstan filled for the short time they were together.
He chose to be with me. He chose his path, and that was with me. I am not to blame.
Ecbert attempted to coerce Athelstan into remaining by his side in England, but Ragnar let him make his own decisions, even if he didn't agree with them. Ragnar not only attempts to distance himself from fault when he states he is not to blame, but also reaffirms his belief that our fate is determined by our own choices. Ragnar wants to believe his death was the result of Floki's jealousy, and not any action or inaction from him. Athelstan was a man torn between two worlds, belonging to neither fully. While Ragnar and Ecbert leaned on him for guidance and support, Athelstan had a yearning for a sense of purpose that transcended his ties to them. His loyalty to both Ragnar and Ecbert was genuine, but he was aware of his outsider status in both of their worlds. To Ragnar, losing Athelstan was not just the loss of his best friend, but also the loss of a bridge between cultures. His death left a void in Ragnar too, a constant reminder of the transient nature of life. In a means to cope, Ragnar shielded himself from feelings of guilt or remorse over his death.
Now who's the one who's not being honest?
Ecbert sees Ragnar's true self exposed. His retort reasserts his control over the conversation, shifting the power dynamic in the scene.
Now we are equal. We can talk together honestly.
He is king now.
Then we are truly equal.
And now they are truly equals. Both Ragnar and Ecbert are skilled in art of manipulation. They share an innate understanding of human nature that they use to outmaneuver their opponents, which is why Ecbert's recognition of Ragnar's pushing of blame is such a hard-hitting moment.
Tell me this. Do you think he's with your gods? Or with mine?
Does that matter?
Ragnar doesn't yet give Ecbert the satisfaction of knowing Athelstan reverted back to his faith. Perhaps he's bitter from Ecbert's recognition of his remorse, but it's more likely that it's a refusal to play into Ecbert's attempt to control the conversation. In this moment, Ragnar honors Athelstan's memory in a way that underscores the bond they had. To Ragnar, what mattered most was the personal connection he had with Athelstan, and not what religion he identified with. By saying it doesn't matter, Ragnar reminds us that Athelstan's fate was his own, and not subject to the interpretations of others. Nobody knows the secrets of other people's hearts, we only think we do. And those who wield power know that better than anyone.
His death is on my conscience, not yours.
And yours will be on mine.
Even so, you have to kill me.
Ragnar is quick to regain control in the scene by bringing the conversation back to where it started, insisting Ecbert has to kill him. He admits Athelstan's death weighs heavily on his conscience. Then Ecbert admits he's already beginning to feel guilty for Ragnar's death. He breaks down, revealing the depth of his sorrow. We finally see beyond his facade of control, to the fragile humanity that lies behind it. He knows Ragnar has to die, but he doesn't want to accept the role he must play in it. Aside from Athelstan, Ragnar is the only person Ecbert has ever truly loved. Seeing how he talks about him after he's gone is evident of that fact. In Judith, he seems to have activated a kindred spirit, but he can never compare to the bond he shares with Ragnar, or shared with Athelstan. Judith serves as a sort of surrogate for the emotional void left by Athelstan in Ecbert. And as for Alfred, Ecbert seems to have taken advantage of his potential and instilled the traits in him that he himself holds highly. Ecbert's love for Alfred is intertwined with his own ego and desire for legacy. He sees in Alfred the embodiment of his own ideals and takes pride in grooming him into a worthy successor. His affection for Alfred is simply a reflection of his self-love. And so, as the conversation hangs in the air, we're left to ponder the significance of Ragnar's silence and the impact that Athelstan's death had on those who knew him best.
This is my son, Alfred.
You are Athelstan's son.
And from the dark abyss of death comes new life. Ragnar receives the great privilege of meeting Alfred, the son of Athelstan. Teary-eyed, the two kings look upon the future, envisioning him as a beacon of fairness, reminiscent of their friend's ethos. Recalling his earlier line, saying the dream might still come to pass, Ecbert has already discovered the promise of a better tomorrow. And finally it dawned on Ragnar what his old friend meant by it. He sees Ecbert's intent to amend their violent past through the legacy of Alfred the Great. Ragnar finds solace in knowing Alfred, being Athelstan's child, will emulate his father's benevolence, making him a fair leader and giving the Vikings good land in England. At long last, Ragnar truly understands what a miracle is. He turns his back to Ecbert and says,
Without explanation.
He sees now that some things happen without clear explanation or reason, and accepts them as part of life. He sees his long-gone friend again in his son. Ragnar, clearly overcome with feelings, embraces Alfred, who hugs him back. Born into royalty, Ecbert managed to further elevate himself in the ranks of his society, but it was not without a price. King Ecbert shares the most common ailment of all men, an insatiable hunger for something more. As he prays, he echoes the Solomon of Ecclesiastes, saying that even though he has achieved so much in life, said achievements fail to satisfy him. God blessed him with the wisdom to be a great leader, but it still remains unfulfilled, much reminiscent of Solomon's conclusions in Ecclesiastes. His initial conclusion was that every part of life is vanity. He looked at life and realized it was all meaningless, that life is the vanity of vanities. He asks, what does a man gain from his labor? He sees that in a universal sense nothing changes in the never-ending cycle of our life, that despite a man's daily routine, he is still not satisfied. A man's life follows a cycle of sleep, work, and relaxation. He observes this unchanging cycle as the monotony of life, which leads to him believing that life is vanity. It's meaningless. Even the new things get old fairly quickly, which he communicates as there is nothing new under the sun. Even if a man works hard, it doesn't matter, it will go unnoticed. Nihilism at its finest. So he took it upon himself to find meaning in the vanity of life. He thought he could find the answer to his questions with wisdom. Remember, Solomon was gifted with great wisdom by God. That is what everyone knows him for. The wisdom of Solomon. By the end he reached another conclusion. What is lacking cannot be counted. His search meant nothing, it only added to his sorrow. Everything is sweeter in man's ambitions than in their fruitions. That is, he who increases knowledge only increases sorrow. And this is what connects Ecbert to Ragnar. This fundamental dynamic underlies his attraction towards him. In Ragnar, Ecbert sees someone who might legitimately understand his pain.
My God, Father, Ayla is your ally and your friend.
Oh no, not my friend. I don't have any friends. It's better that way.
As Ragnar, much like Ecbert, is isolated, friendless, Ragnar doesn't talk to his family anymore, not since Athelstan died. Lagertha has moved on, so he leaves her alone. He doesn't interact with his sons, and they no longer need him. His brother left him, and Floki betrayed him by killing the only man that meant more to him than his wife Lagertha.
I cannot kill you. Yet you must die. This much is certain. The world demands it, but I cannot kill you.
How can Ragnar die without facing the act of being killed by Ecbert? This paradoxical statement reflects the conundrum Ragnar has put Ecbert in. Ecbert recognizes that outright killing Ragnar will be detrimental to his people. He understands that Ragnar's death would elevate him to martyr status among his people, motivating them to seek vengeance and burn Wessex to the ground. For the first time in his life, he has no answers. He is truly lost, and in fact has been trapped by his dear old friend. Ragnar did not expect Ecbert's refusal to execute him, but that's not to say he wasn't prepared. The cunning tactician he is quick to propose a deal that would not only result in the destruction of the Christians, but also provide a solution to Ecbert's dilemma.
Then hand me over to King Ayla. For we both know that he would take great pleasure in killing me. Then you can wash your hands of me.
Ragnar uses everything he learned about Christianity from Athelstan to manipulate Ecbert into mirroring the story of the infamous Pontius Pilate, a man who deluded himself into believing he was not responsible for the execution of Jesus Christ by pushing the blame to somewhere else. There have been many depictions of Pilate. Jewish sources depicted him as a merciless ruler who sentenced Jesus to death simply because he hated him and his teachings. Christian ones depicted him as a weak man that was pressured into bending the knee and condemning Jesus to death. No matter which one you think may be true, one through line is common in all depictions of the man. He tried to shift the blame elsewhere. And just as Pilate shifted the responsibility away from himself, Ragnar convinces Ecbert that his sons won't hold him accountable if Ayla is seen as his executioner. Ecbert's desire to believe this narrative completely blinds him from the harsh truth lurking beneath. Ragnar's execution by his hands will fail to raise the wrath of his sons, but Ayla is sure to deliver a show of agony and horror so great that his sons will be forced to retaliate, which proves he is a true master of both Norse and Christian mythologies. He understands that for his plan to work, he has to imbue his sons with the impetus to exact a type of revenge he is incapable of exacting himself. Ragnar is no longer able to, but his sons are more than capable of assembling a great heathen army. This further proves why Ragnar is a great leader. He gives up the satisfaction of first-hand witnessing his enemy's downfall for the sake of his people's prosperity. He makes a sacrifice that renders his family unable to call themselves Viking unless they repay their debt to him via Saxon blood. Paired with a speech so spectacular, it secures his position next to the gods in Valhalla, a place he no longer believes exists.
My friend, I'd rather set you free.
As stated before, Ecbert won't even entertain the idea of playing a part in his friend's death, no matter how minor. He has already lost Athelstan, twice. There's no possible way he'll send Ragnar to his death and lose him too. Unless...
My sons know that I've come to Wessex to see you. What do you think they'll do once they hear of my death? They will come over here, and they will rip the lungs out of all of you. They will avenge me.
I don't doubt you.
We trust each other, yes?
Yes.
Then do this for me. Let my crippled son Ivar go home. He is obviously no threat to you. I will tell my son Ivar to tell his brothers that you did everything you could to save me. That you and we are sworn friends. And that King Ayla was solely responsible for my death.
After all the heinous acts he's done, Ecbert still wants to believe he's a good person deep down. And Ragnar sees this in his eyes. Since they are alike in more ways than one, he reads him like an open book. So he plays on Ecbert's fear of his kingdom in disarray after his death. He stated that, thanks to him, his country is now capable of defending itself against any outside force, and it's something that he'd like to believe, but his knowledge and experience with the Vikings won't let him. Ragnar's deal is too good to be true, and Ecbert knows, more than anyone, that in the Game of Thrones nothing is this easy. But he needs this. He wants to believe it so badly he begins to shake. Ecbert does not want to kill Ragnar. Even so, he has to get rid of Ayla, and Ragnar has to die. He's unsure, sad even, sad to lose the only friend he has. He attempts to ask God for guidance, but Ragnar stops him, symbolizing his philosophy that we are in charge of our own lives, and we have to make the best of what we can. He grabs his hands and looks him in the eyes.
Don't be afraid.
Something that will be echoed by his son Ivar moments before his death. The title of this episode is an excerpt from a poem by T.S. Eliot titled Little Gidding. The episode and the poem share a couple of thematic connections with each other. In the poem, the uncertain hour part signifies a moment of transition, where the past intersects with both the present and the future, underlined with a sense of possibility, which the events of this episode echo, as the characters are tasked with making impossible decisions that will shape the future of their people, while confronting their pasts. Another connection between the poem and the episode I also found was, they both explore themes of redemption. The poem speaks on a search for meaning and the possibility of finding redemption, even in a time of uncertainty, which is what this episode explores with Ragnar and Ecbert's characters. We see Ecbert grapple with the choice of sending a great man to his death, trying to find a way to wash his hands of Ragnar's blood, and asking for absolution. And Ragnar's intentions of going to England was so he'd be redeemed for his past failures in his people's eyes, like never telling them what happened to their English settlement, for example, or letting Floki lead the initial attack on Paris mainly because he was angry at him. which is why his death and the events leading up to it are so compelling. Ragnar and Ecbert are friends. Both men understand what it truly means to be king. They know that there's no place for companionship in a leader's life, and so one of them has to send the other to his death. And for better or for worse, he'll bear witness.
They aren't going to release me. I have to die. People think that you are not a threat, but I know differently. And it is you that I believe is the most important to the future of our people. I'm just about prepared to believe you. Shut up and listen, idiot. You have many gifts. Anger is a gift. What is in here is a gift. Use your anger intelligently. And I promise you, my son, that one day the whole world will know and fear Ivar the Boneless.
Ragnar knows this will be the last time he's with his son, and so he delivers his final wisdom to him. In Ivar, Ragnar recognizes a great potential, his anger and intelligence. Ragnar's attempts to encourage Ivar are juxtaposed with Ivar's defiance. Ragnar's words reflect his desire for Ivar to embrace the fact that he is not like other men, and find his strength in that fact, while Ivar's responses reveal his struggle with self-acceptance. Ragnar tells him to not waste his gifts, to use his anger as a source of motivation, rather than letting it always consume him. And it's a lesson that takes some time for young Ivar to fully grasp, but as he matures he internalizes the lesson, transforming into a cunning warrior that the whole world knows and fears. Anger can be an extremely useful emotion, if utilized correctly, but if you're constantly angry, people will avoid you like the plague. Or if you just bottle it up, eventually it will overcome you, making you do and say things that you'll later come to regret. Our ability to think clearly and problem solve effectively is compromised when we are feeling extreme anger. But what people not seem to understand is that all emotions are on a spectrum, including anger. It can range from simple annoyance all the way up to full-on primal rage. The instantaneous burst of anger that causes people to lash out tends to be blown out of proportion due to it being the fight-or-flight instinct that is controlled by the primitive brainstem and limbic system, also known as the downstairs of the brain. As time passes, cognitive functions kick back in, allowing for the contextualization of the events that triggered it, which helps readjust the anger on the spectrum. Majority of the time, what incites anger is just minor annoyances that build on each other. That is why the most common advice you hear for managing anger is to take a step back, or something akin to that.
I wish I wasn't so angry all the time. Then you would be nothing. I might have been happy. Happiness is nothing. I was only joking. Idiot.
Maybe not. Regardless of his true desires, years later, Ivar's wish is fulfilled and becomes happy for a short while. He meets two people who become immensely influential for Ivar. One was Prince Oleg, whom served as a reflection for Ivar, a way of introspection, as both men were as ambitious as anyone could be. And in Oleg, Ivar saw how pointless his ambitions were, and how much he didn't really care about being king. The other was Prince Igor, who loved Ivar, just as Ragnar loved Athelstan, and the two served as sort of mentors for their friends, teaching them how to be better leaders and providing them with knowledge about other cultures. Ivar's great intellect at last being useful for something, he was happy to help young Igor become a fair king. Through him, Ivar finally knew what it was like to be loved and happy. He was far more intelligent than anyone else. He knew how to overcome any challenge he faced, and like Ecbert, that intellect only brought him misery. Like Ecbert, he became bored while living in a peaceful world, with nothing to stimulate him. Ivar never fought for peace, and being raised as a warrior from birth, had no intentions of living in such a world. So Ivar asked himself, what is a man supposed to do when he was bred for war, yet lacks the desire to fight? What else is left for him to do, except die? Thus, taken after his father, he set out to make his own death. But even when he got to England, he was still bored, and Alfred, not being the opponent Ivar expected he would be, survival itself ceased to be a challenge to him, and when the opportunity presented itself to him, he took it. He felt Witzek was in danger, so he joined the battle, while making his great speech, not for himself, but for his people much like his father. A random Saxon soldier snuck up behind him, mirroring how he managed to sneak up on Björn. As he looked into the soldier's eyes, he realized this was it, and without resistance he accepted it, dying in the arms of someone who loved him. Ragnar's words challenge his assumptions about the emotions people want to feel to live a fulfilling and a successful life. Happiness is diminishing returns. It seems for most of us, feeling happy and living a meaningful life are related to one another. but many of the things we choose to do, like asking for a raise, won't actually increase our day-to-day happiness. There's a difference between living a happy life and a meaningful one. Due to how our brain handles achievements, the pursuit of constant happiness will forever remain an elusive dream. When a person buys a new car, for example, at first they'll be excited. It's a brand new car, so how could it not be? It's in pristine condition, nothing is broken, the handling is better, it's more responsive, and there's all these new features that weren't in the previous car. But after about a week or so, they've broken it in, got used to it, and now it's simply their car. That initial rush of excitement has dissipated. That's why people cling to the new car smell so much. They're chasing that same level of excitement, that same level of happiness they were at when they first got the car. Having your life changed as a result of newfound riches will only give you a huge surge in dopamine levels, which generates momentary excitement and pleasure. One of the reasons why we climbed and stayed on top of the food chain was because of our ability to adjust to extreme environmental or lifestyle changes in a short amount of time. So unfortunately, any happiness gained from receiving a large amount of money or purchasing a new car will only last for that long. This is called the hedonic adaptation, where we eventually get used to our new life and we go back down to the same level of happiness we were before it. But still, having the level of money that allows a person to buy whatever they believe they need in life will give them higher levels of happiness overall. Nevertheless, having enough money will not grant that person higher levels of fulfillment. Therefore, happiness is nothing, and wanting to be happy is actually meaningless. That's the point Ragnar is making. What makes us happy won't necessarily bring a sense of fulfillment to our life.
Who told you you should be happy? You've come to an age where you must grow up and be responsible about such things. When I was your age, I had many friends. All are dead. The happiness is neither here nor there.
Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose. Ragnar is attempting to teach his sons that an obsession with happiness will ultimately lead to feelings of emptiness and a life that lacks meaning. Having responsibilities won't make you happy, but it can, over time, add up to a meaningful life. And in his eyes, it's better to live a meaningful life than a happy one.
If this Hela is going to kill you, then me and all my brothers will seek her for revenge, and you know that. Yes. Oh, you must seek revenge, but not on Hela. And Ecbert.
Ragnar's earlier recontextualization of Ecbert's line makes perfect sense now. He recognizes that Ecbert is the true power behind the Saxon power structure. Hela is merely a puppet, and the master pulling the string from far away is Ecbert. By targeting Ecbert, Ivar isn't just seeking retribution, he's striking at the heart of the Christians.
Everyone will always underestimate you. You must make them pay for it.
In the Norse society, where strength and prowess are valued above all else, the physically disabled like Ivar have to fight an uphill battle for their whole lives. If they aren't left for dead after birth, that is. They're often looked down upon and viewed as less. It's a harsh truth, but one that Ragnar urges Ivar to use to his advantage, telling him once he embraces his disability, that is when he'll achieve greatness.
I will, Father. Be ruthless.
Indeed, in such a brutal environment, mercy is a luxury few can afford. For someone like Ivar to not only survive but also be noticed, he has to be willing to embrace ruthlessness and to do whatever it takes. The lessons Ragnar instills in Ivar greatly influence him for the rest of his life. It's only logical why Ivar would take everything his father said to him so closely to his heart, seeing as the only time they ever spent time together was their trip to England. It's clear that what little time he spent with his father shaped his view on what a Viking should be. From Ivar's point of view, Ragnar embodies the paragon of Viking greatness, a fearless leader who defies tradition and forges his own path. Yet deep down he resents him, due to a lifetime of being overshadowed by him. While he takes pride in being Ragnar's son, he also feels he has an obligation to prove himself worthy of the Lothbrok name, and to surpass his father in fame.
Well, I've no doubt Ayla will enjoy the sight of your death. I'm sure he'll make it a big spectacle.
so I will have the chance to speak. I'll talk about the gods, about my joy of entering Valhalla.
Even though you don't believe it.
I don't. But my sons do. My people do. Faith is as important to them as it is to you, King Ecbert.
The god rays bathed Ragnar in a sort of ethereal glow, symbolizing his upcoming journey into the afterlife, foreshadowing his death. And Ragnar, ever fearless, laughs in the face of death. Despite the grim path awaiting him, he retains his characteristic wit and resolve. He is fearless, yet empathetic, skeptical, yet introspective. He has long come to terms with his fate and is ready to meet it head-on, without apology, like a true Viking. On the other hand is Ecbert, swallowed by the shadows, reflecting how guilt-stricken he is from having to send his best friend to his death, also symbolizing his ignorance of Ragnar's true intentions. Ragnar is keeping him in the dark. But what he fully understands are the qualities that make a great king, something which Ragnar also understands, and Ecbert always admired his ability to inspire loyalty and devotion in his people. Ecbert questions his beliefs, knowing his old friend is a skeptic, but his response is not one of defiance. He understands that a leader cannot be without faith, and respects the role that he plays in providing comfort, guidance, and purpose to his people. This is a moment of mutual understanding between these two formidable leaders, both knowing they have to make great personal sacrifices in order to be a great king, that their responsibilities outweigh their own desires. Their leadership can bring little to no pleasure or satisfaction to a person, but all of that could change in the near future. It's through this hope that Ragnar gestures with Athelstan's crucifix to Ecbert.
This was your father's. May it comfort you as it has comforted me.
Ragnar giving Alfred his father's cross seemed to indicate that he has, at last, come to terms with Athelstan's death and his final choice. As Ragnar hands over the crucifix to him, there's an acknowledgement of the bond between them. It's a passing of the torch, a symbol of legacy and lineage. But it's what Ragnar says to Ecbert that cuts to the core.
I think it will console you to know, in the end, Athelstan chose your God.
The influence Athelstan had on Ecbert and Ragnar continues to resonate with both of them, as Ragnar hands over the cross to Athelstan's son and delivers this piercing line to Ecbert. We just witnessed the culmination of the complex relationship, not only with each other, but with Athelstan as well. It breaks Ragnar's heart to know that, despite the bond they shared, Athelstan's loyalty ultimately laid with Ecbert and his God. The pain of this realization is visible. When Ecbert allowed Ragnar to meet Athelstan's son, he offered closure to him. And when Ragnar allows Ecbert the satisfaction of knowing where Athelstan's fate lied in the end, he extends the offer and grants him that same closure. He turned away and entered his cage quickly. However, during the ride to face his fate at the hands of King Eliot, he converses with the driver of his last carriage, unafraid to look his coachman in the eyes, and he sees that he is, in fact, blind, which may be a reflection of Ragnar's search for enlightenment.
Don't worry. I can see you, Ragnar Lothbrok. I can see you.
When will we reach King Eliot?
Not until tomorrow.
Ragnar has not a single doubt in his mind. The Seer was wrong. He told Ragnar one day a blind man would see him, and on that day he would meet his end. But the coachman tells him they will not arrive for another day, and for that reason Ragnar declares his victory over all of the gods and over the Seer. Even though 1,000 kilometers separate them, he chats with him one last time.
It will be at least another day before I am put to death. You and your gods are wrong. You see, I guided my fate. I fashioned the course of my life and my death. Me. Not you, not the gods. Me. It was my idea.
You believe that, so it is true to you?
Your words can be interpreted in so many ways, that they cease to cause comfort or knowledge, but rather confusion. Your so-called prophecies are dangerous.
How so?
Like telling Lagertha that she would never have another child, yet she got pregnant. But then Because of your words, she put her unborn baby in danger. So what if she didn't hear your words? So you presented her a destiny, and she manifested it.
Perhaps it was her fate to have the child perish in exactly the way it did.
But what if it wasn't?
What if it was?
Is this actually the seer who is admitting his religion is superficial, or is it Ragnar admitting it to himself? Hasn't the legendary Ragnar Lothbrok walked among the dead? In his travels, hasn't he searched for answers? Couldn't he have been wrong in attempting to look outwards for meaning rather than inwards, much like Solomon in his story? Perhaps this isn't a debate with the seer, but rather an introspective moment for Ragnar. After finally figuring out the true role the seer always served, an interpreter of prophecies and nothing more, he questions the reliability of the seer's insights, while pointing at the consequences they might have on people's lives. And when the seer speaks, as opposed to his characteristic riddles, he gives simple responses, illustrating Ragnar's own inner conflicts. He's been grappling with himself and with his own beliefs for a while now, so it's safe to assume that this is Ragnar telling his last thoughts on fate to a fictitious seer, and we're really witnessing his internal struggles laid bare. Ragnar, like the great king he was, takes responsibility for the decisions that have led him to this point, even suggesting he willfully chose to come to this place only to meet his demise. The seer, in his trademark cryptic tone, or should I say Ragnar, acknowledges his personal belief, arguing that reality is shaped by one's perceptions and beliefs, and that the seer's words effectively create self-fulfilling prophecies. The conversation reaches the same impasse we witnessed in Ragnar and Ecbert's debate about the gods, whether they are real or not because inconsequential. Whether Legata's fate dictated her child's death doesn't matter. It happened, and now we have to live with it.
I don't believe in the gods' existence. Man is the master of his own fate, not the gods. The gods are man's creation to give answers that they are too afraid to give themselves.
You may be right, Ragnar Lothbrok. I am only the seer. I have walked among the lowest of the dead, and I have groped for meaning. And I may have been wrong.
What did you say? I didn't say anything.
Ragnar believes there is no inherent meaning built into the universe. It just is, and it's up to us to write our own destinies, to make of life what we can. Over the years of his travels, we saw his beliefs evolve. He began as a man who believed himself to be a direct descendant of Odin. He has worshipped the gods, and then a god, and this back and forth is what made Ragnar realize that our religion is false. For a while now, he viewed gods as mere constructs of human imagination, instead of actual divine entities. They are a means to provide comfort and answers to existential questions that shield people from the harsh realities of life. And as much as it would comfort him to know that his dearest friend is happy in heaven, he simply cannot ignore that religious beliefs only present a false sense of security, by offering eternal happiness in the afterlife. Be it heaven or Valhalla, if you do the things religion says are good, you'll be rewarded and live happily forever and ever. But if you don't, you'll be punished and suffer forever. And perhaps Ragnar's defiance of all gods incurred their wrath. His life has been constant suffering since he first traveled to England. He was crowned an earl, then a king. He was forced to fight his own brother on multiple occasions. His daughter Gidding died in a plague while he was away. His wife and oldest son abandoned him. Athelstan also left him. His unborn grandson died. His English settlement was destroyed. He had kidney failure, internal bleeding, and broke his ribs at one point. He lost a lot of his people in Paris. His youngest son was born without bones, and his closest friend betrayed him out of sheer spite. The death of Athelstan was the event that deepened his sense of isolation and despair the most, and perhaps the gods took him from him as a punishment. He was suffering both physically and mentally for the majority of his life. He was living in hell. But to Ragnar, that sounds like an extremely simplistic view of the world. Bloodshed and suffering was common to all in the Viking ages after all. The way his Viking explores religion is fascinating to me. The relationship the characters have to religion is interesting, to say the least. We see Ragnar and Ecbert, both admirers of their respective religions, slowly slump into disbelief over time, and in their final moments converting to nihilism. After achieving their ambitions, they succumb to chronic depression, and with religious people such as them, that can often lead to a crisis of faith. To them, depression might seem senseless and cause them to distrust their gods. The loss of faith means that the morality imposed by religion is also lost. If someone doesn't believe in the source of their society's moral order, its morality becomes unenforceable. The result is a struggle to maintain a system of moral values in the face of nihilism, i.e. the rejection of faith is a rejection of morality. And I would argue that Ragnar's actions show he has no morals anymore. But with that, Ragnar retreats back to his thoughts, preparing himself for the journey that lies ahead.
It's taken you a long time to return, Ragnar Lothbrok. But at last, you are here. This is a good day, Ragnar Lothbrok. For this is the day that the souls of every innocent Christian shall escape from their purgatory and sing Hallelujah. For I am about the Lord's work. Ask for absolution. Ask for absolution. Ask for absolution.
How the little piggies will grunt when they hear how the home balls of it.
When Ragnar arrives at the snake pit, he is greeted by an overzealous King Eliot. His first words to Ragnar echo Ecbert's first words to the old boar. With no greetings, Eliot cuts straight to the chase, and only mentions it took his dear old enemy a long time to return. They are both old men now, that much is certain. They no longer have time for small talk. Ragnar has many sins he must atone for, and through being tortured, he is given a chance to. 3 chances to be exact, the magic number. 3 times does Eliot press Ragnar to beg for absolution, and 3 times does Ragnar refuse, without apology. Eliot's not looking for remorse though, he's out for vengeance, and it's just as important to Eliot as it is for Ragnar. Despite his outward displays of devotion and prayers for deliverance from his enemies, Eliot's actions tell a different story. They give a glimpse into his true nature as someone who's capable of just as much violence and cruelty as the enemies he calls pagans. But considering the Vikings invented the bloody good, maybe not as much. Even though brutality and cruelty were not uncommon in the Viking ages, the treatment Ragnar receives from Eliot pales in comparison to what his sons will do to him in return. In spite of being beaten down, burnt, and marked with a cross, Ragnar walks back into his cage, waiting for his death, welcoming it. He sleeps and thinks of Athelstan one last time. He thinks about the time he taught him how to pray. Soon after he sent Ragnar away, Ecbert sets off to follow him, disguising himself as a monk. In his stories, Odin would often dress up as a wanderer, hiding his face with a hood, and posed as a humble everyman. Fun fact, one of the names he was known by was the Hooded One, and so Ragnar, who saw Odin in Season 1 disguised as a wanderer on the battlefield, now sees the Allfather again, one last time. Odin takes form in the guise of the man who was his close friend and his greatest nemesis, embodying the duality of their relationship, a bond forged in friendship and rivalry. Ragnar, in his final moments as he performs the speech that secures him as a true martyr, does not die alone. Ecbert makes sure he is there for him at the end. Their relationship as friends makes the scene even more heartbreaking.
It gladdens me to know that Odin prepares for a feast. Soon I shall be drinking ale from curved horns. I shall not enter Odin's hall with fear. There, I shall wait for my sons to join me. And when they do, I will bask in their tales of triumph. The Seer will welcome me. My death comes without apology. And I welcome the Valkyries to summon me home.
Deliver me, O Lord, from mine enemies!
It's a great speech, and it's true that Ragnar doesn't believe any of it. Remember, earlier he told Ecbert all of this is just for his sons. He might not believe any of it anymore, but his sons and his people do, and that's the only thing that matters. As Eliot drops him into the snake pit and he looks up, past its narrow, long walls, he sees 2 kings, Ecbert and Eliot staring over the edge. And when he sees them, he is blessed with one final gift from the gods, from both the Christian and the Norse gods that is. The sight of his old enemies, the man who will be the subject of his retribution. King Eliot, his first victim, and King Ecbert, the blind man who saw him in his final moments. Ecbert's gaze fixated on Ragnar indicates a plea for absolution, perhaps seeking solace from his old friend. But alas, Ragnar denies him of the forgiveness he so desperately craves, and as Ragnar's body fills with poison, he dies happy, knowing in the end he managed to outsmart his equal. Ragnar's eyes close, and like the doors of Valhalla close for him in the beginning of this season, the doors of the snake pit close over him. Later in the season, after the Norse have defeated his army, Ecbert is imprisoned and put in a cage, just like Ragnar was. Adhering to his character, the cunning bastard that he is, he manipulates Ragnar's sons into letting him choose the method of his execution, by letting them believe he can give them a new settlement in England. But unlike Ragnar, this wasn't for the sake of something selfless. He just wanted to die by his own hands, in peace, and not experience the pains of being blood-eagled, like Eliot was. Overall, their scenes offer a compelling exploration of friendship and the existential struggles of leadership. You don't gain power and achieve greatness without a price, and in both Answer and Hour and all his angels we get to see what their accomplishments costed them. With the scenes between Ragnar and Ecbert, we were treated to a full spectrum of emotions, spanning from happiness to sadness, while covering all the major emotions in between the two, such as intimacy, anger, and remorse. In their twilight years, we got to see them being their most genuine selves, perhaps ever. Their interactions not only shaped the future of their people, but also echoed the timeless struggle between tradition and progress.
You and I, we understand each other.
Do you think you're a good man?
Yes, I think so. Are you a good man?
Yes. I think so. Are you corrupt?
Oh, yes. Are you?
Mm-hmm.
We pay the price for improved lives in blood and fear. Maybe it's worth it, maybe it isn't, but all the same, there's a price. And perhaps the price of Ragnar and Ecbert's dream of their people's improved lives was their own.